Look at a photo of your grandparents. Wrinkles, gray hair, age spots. Now here's the twist that's going to mess with your head for the rest of this video. An actual ancient human, someone who lived 30,000 years ago, almost never looked like that. Not because they aged better, because of something much darker. Most of them never got old enough to wrinkle, and the ones who did, their bodies looked nothing like what you'd expect. We're talking bones ground down like sandpaper, teeth worn flat as coins, joints wrecked before age 40. Ancient humans didn't age gracefully. They didn't age badly either. They mostly just didn't age. And the handful who survived long enough to actually get old looked like nothing you've ever seen depicted in a movie. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why, and it's going to change how you look at every caveman cartoon you've ever seen. Let's start with the number that breaks people's brains every time. Average life expectancy in the Paleolithic era was somewhere between 30 and 35 years old. Now, stop right there, because that number lies to you if you don't understand it. It doesn't mean people drop dead the moment they hit 35. It means infant and child mortality was so catastrophically high that it dragged the average down hard. If you made it past childhood, actually survived to your 20s, your real odds of reaching 60 weren't nearly as bad as that number suggests. But here's the part that still holds up. Even the ones who survived childhood, survived childbirth, survived the animals, survived the winters, their bodies were living a completely different kind of life than yours. And that life left marks, just not the ones you're picturing. So if it wasn't wrinkles, what was it? Teeth. Let's start there, because ancient teeth tell a story more brutal than anything Hollywood puts in a caveman movie. Grinding stones used to process food left grit and tiny rock particles mixed into everything they ate. Every single meal for their entire life included an invisible layer of sandpaper. Archaeologists studying ancient jawbones find teeth worn down to flat, smooth stumps by their 30s, a level of where a modern person wouldn't reach until their 80s, if ever. Next, joints. No chairs, no soft matrices, no days off, constant walking, squatting, carrying, hauling, climbing, for literally their entire waking life, starting in early childhood. Skeletal remains from Paleolithic sites show arthritis and joint degeneration in people who, by our standards, were still relatively young. 25-year-old ancient humans sometimes show the joint wear of a modern 60-year-old, and bones themselves bowed, fractured, badly healed. No orthopedic surgery. No casts. A broken leg that heals wrong just stays wrong for the rest of your life. So picture that for a second. A body that's young in years but already wrecked. Not wrinkled. Ruined. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, though, because you'd expect the rare people who did survive into real old age to look ancient and frail. That's not exactly what the evidence shows either. And the reason why is honestly one of the weirder facts in this entire topic. Stick with me, because this next part is the one that made me want to make this video in the first place. Gray hair. You'd think ancient elders were full gray by 50. Actually, genetics researchers studying pigmentation suggest something counterintuitive. Because so few people lived long enough for age-related graying to fully set in, and because we don't have soft tissue to examine for most remains, we genuinely don't have strong direct evidence that widespread graying looked the way you're picturing. What we do know is that survival to visible old age was rare enough that the old one in any group was likely one of a tiny handful of people across the entire band, sometimes the only person who had ever reached that age within living memory of the group. Skin and wrinkles are even harder to study directly, since soft tissue almost never survives 30,000 years. But here's the logical piece researchers point to: modern hunter-gatherer populations who still live active outdoor lifestyles today, with heavy sun exposure, physical labor, and minimal skincare, do show earlier and more pronounced skin aging than sedentary modern populations, but not necessarily more wrinkled in the dramatic way you'd assume. Some of it is textural. Weathered, sun-damaged, thickened skin, different from soft aging skin, not necessarily deeper wrinkles. Put it together and you get something genuinely unexpected. The rare ancient elder probably had leathery, sun-toughened, tan skin, but a body already broken by joint disease and dental wreckage that made them look and move far older than their actual age in years. And this is where the story gets almost emotional, honestly, because reaching old age in a hunter-gatherer band wasn't just rare, it made you enormously valuable. Anthropologists studying surviving hunter-gatherer societies today consistently find the same pattern. Elders are the memory bank of the group. They remember the drought that happened decades ago. They remember which plants are poisonous. They remember how the group survived the last true catastrophe. In a world with no written records, a person who survived to 60 was carrying knowledge nobody else in the band possessed. That means the handful of visibly old ancient humans weren't seen as frail burdens the way aging is sometimes framed today. They were closer to a living archive, rare, valuable, and treated accordingly. So let's address the elephant in the room. Why does every cartoon caveman look like a wrinkled, hunched, gray-bearded old man? Almost entirely because of one specific, famous skeleton. The Old Man of La Chapelle, a Neanderthal skeleton discovered in in 1908 and originally reconstructed as a hunched, primitive brute. For decades, this exact image became the template for caveman in illustrations, textbooks, and pop culture. Except later reanalysis showed the hunch was largely due to severe arthritis this particular individual suffered from personally, not a species-wide trait. He was old for his environment, likely in his 40s, ancient by Neanderthal standards, and had endured real physical trauma and disease. His skeleton reflected serious individual health problems, not the default ancient human body. In other words, the entire pop culture image of the wrinkled old caveman is largely built from one sick individual's skeleton, misinterpreted, and then copy-pasted into 100 years of illustrations. So back to that opening claim that ancient humans mostly didn't age the way you picture. Here's the real shape of it. Most never lived long enough to develop the visible signs of old age you'd recognize. The ones who did survive had bodies wrecked by physical labor and diet-related wear, flattened teeth, degraded joints, poorly healed fractures, years before they'd show anything resembling old by modern standards. And the visual template you have in your head for ancient human elder traces back largely to a single misinterpreted skeleton from over a century ago. It's not that they aged better or worse than us. It's that aging, for them, was an entirely different physical experience, shaped by grit in their food, constant physical labor, and a body that had to survive on its own without a single modern medical intervention. So next time you see a wrinkled elderly face and think, that's what getting old looks like, remember that for the overwhelming majority of human history, that image barely existed. Old age wasn't common enough to have a normal look. It was rare, hard-won, and worn on the body in ways that had nothing to do with wrinkles at all. The wrinkled old man in your head isn't ancient humanity. He's one sick skeleton from 1908 that we never stopped drawing.